Welcome to Dingers and Dashers. My name is Josh alongside my co-host Adam. It's a great day to talk all thing Caps hockey, and today we have a very special guest, Michael Lindenbaum of TXHT Hockey joining us. Michael, how you doing?
Doing good, doing good. We've been working on this for a few months, so I just want to say I would like to thank the Academy for making this. No, just kidding. So I bring up a Beavis and Butthead Valentine's plushie bouquet, so. But no, it's great. We've been talking for a couple months, to make this happen. Obviously, when the season's going on, it's kind of hard, but this is the best time to do it because, I'm kind of in a little bit of a break right now. So this is the best time.
Yeah, we all are right now with the hockey. Right now at the Olympics, a lot of players on a break, a lot of players not going to the Olympics, but there's still hockey going on, but maybe not the NHL that we're all used to.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Michael.
I was going to say, yeah, hockey's going on, but it's not, I'm in the minority on this one, but it's not meaningful hockey. There's a couple things I'm paying attention to, which is like goalie interference and, how hits are refereed and stuff like that. But, this doesn't even touch the NHL hockey. I know I'm in the minority in that one.
But you're not a fan, even if the players, like, it seems like they're trying their hardest. It seems like they're really trying to win for their country. And
yeah, ask the LA Kings how they feel about Kevin Fiala.
Yeah, losing a top player in a game that doesn't actually matter for your cup contention. That's tough. And we're going to get into that goalie interference. But to start off with some Olympic newsworthy notes, we're filming this on Sunday. Tom Wilson, how about the Gordie Howe?
Yeah, I was driving around doing Instacart, but my notifications blew up over it. And it's like, it's kind of cool. I was telling you guys there's a little bit of historical fact here. So obviously, in the Olympics, fighting results in an automatic ejection. The first time the NHL allowed their players to go to the Olympics was in 1998 when it was in Nagano, Japan. Do you guys know which NHL player got tossed from a game for fighting? It is a Washington Capital. I'll put that out there. 1998.
A little niche, a little old for my knowledge right there.
I'm 39 years old, so I will remember this. And I just did a docu-series on my website about the 97-98 Capitals. So Peter Bondra.
Oh, Peter Bondra, okay.
It was Peter Bondra, and it was in a consolation game between Slovakia and Germany, whose goaltender was Olaf Kolzig, and the fight happened right in front of Kolzig. And Kolzig is even quoted as saying, I don't know what to do here. Do I step in to help out my teammate on the Capitals, or do I step in to help my teammate for Germany?
That's definitely tough, which is why I'm hoping to see some Slovakia-Canada action, get Martin Ferivari going up against the likes of Wilson and Logan Thompson. That would be kind of fun to see as Caps fans.
Yeah, people were saying that Wilson was not going to fight. There's no way anyone fights the Olympics. They're going to be a lot more chill about it. Like, they get ejected. Tom Wilson, he's going to be. He has not shown to take any steps down in his physicality. I know that hit on Fiala, that was not like a bad hit by Tom Wilson.
It wasn't even a hit. It wasn't even a hit because I wanted to see it because all the haters are going to come out and say the thing. And the thing is that at the end of the day, Fiala turns his back to Wilson in an attempt to do more of a reverse hit to Wilson. And as a result, Wilson tries to get around and it creates a collision and an awkward fall. It's just one of those deals where, it's unfortunate that it happened. Like I alluded to earlier, the LA Kings are probably not very happy campers right now, especially after doing the trade to pick up Artemi Panarin to provide support to Kevin Fiala, who is the second leading goal scorer on the Kings, as they try to make a push for the playoffs. But that's one of the unfortunate things about these tournaments is that, NHL teams, are literally gritting their teeth on stuff like that. So
Wilson even dealing with his injury coming into the Olympics, a lot of our attention was just make it to the Olympics. But now the story kind of shifts from don't just make it to the Olympics, stay healthy through the Olympics, make it back to the U.S. for NHL hockey.
Well, and you bring that up, like Thompson did not play until the last game against Nashville going in. So my question is how much was that was that Canada saying, hey, can you sit him and not have him play until like the last one just as a tune-up game against Nat? And if that's the case, I'm sorry the Capitals are trying to get themselves back into better playoff positioning. We need our number one goaltender. That's unacceptable. But then look at Team USA with Jack Hughes of the New Jersey Devils. He's been out injured, and they've been going, oh, well, he's day-to-day, he's day-to-day. But for the U.S. team, he should be ready to go. So what you're saying is that he's really ready to go now, but Team USA is telling you, the New Jersey Devils, hey, can you continue to sit Jack Hughes so he's ready for us? The hell with you guys and you trying to get yourselves also in the better playoff position for the Stanley Cup. You know, it's one of the reasons why I'm adamantly against the NHL shutting down for the Olympics. There's other reasons as well. We could possibly go into those later, but you see where these red flags keep coming up for me, where it's like it just doesn't sit right with me. And this is a hockey fan looking out for the rest of the teams in the NHL, because I want that parity. I want that competition to be healthy for the Capitals when they play all these teams and stuff like that, you know, because it makes it meaningful.
Yes, speaking of Jack Hughes, he has been playing a good amount of minutes for Team USA, actually, and it's actually interesting that you point that out, because Logan Thompson, they were saying that he could have been that he was looking to come back days before that last game that he came back, and I was like, why is he not coming back? Is this something to do with Team Canada? Is he not going to play for Canada because only one game back before the break? Is that like something that Canada doesn't want him? But now that you like bring it up that maybe Canada was saying sit him, that's kind of like. That would be ridiculous, because we needed him. We were struggling way before that. We did end going into the break on a pretty good streak right there. But yeah, that would have been unfortunate if he was healthy and we weren't able to play him.
And Clay Stevenson played admirably during those times too, you know, picking up his first career win. I mean, yeah, he got saddled with the one loss, but that's just because the team in front of him just didn't really give him the support that he needed for that. But, you know, he played great. You know, hat tip to, you know, Charlie Lindgren for, you know, the Detroit game where he gets hurt in overtime and, you know, literally at the end of overtime and still guts it out for the shootout where the Cavs literally had to go for a perfect 3 for 3, you know, to win it. But yeah, but if Thompson was able to come back much earlier than that, you know, he should have been playing. But one thing that helped out Thompson at least was the fact that it was always known that Jordan Binnington was going to play the first game for Canada, and then it was going to be either Thompson or Kemper playing that second game. So so you always kind of knew Thompson wasn't going to play that first game for Canada regardless of the situation.
Yeah, and obviously the Caps, they do need Logan Thompson if they want to make their playoff push. But the silver lining to come out of that Thompson sitting is, you know, you have a goalie who's ready to go in Clay Stevenson. People said great things about him after game 82 last year in Pittsburgh. He gives up 6 goals, but he looks okay for someone who's never played an NHL game.
Well, that was also a game where he had no team in front of him even trying, because they had the playoffs secured at that point.
Yeah, the Caps sat everybody once they clinched the conference last year, and those were a tough couple of weeks to watch. But I think that the silver line to come out of it is, Lindgren goes down and that's tough, but now you understand the depth that you have, and you have confidence in a guy like Clay Stevenson, who maybe you didn't have that confidence before. So now if Lindgren can get healthy, all of a sudden you have 3 goalies who are capable of winning you games, when going into the season you were wondering if you just had 1 or even 2.
Well, you technically have 4, because you also have Garen Bjorklund, who's technically 4th on the depth chart. And here's the thing, and this is something that a lot of people need to understand. Last week, this past week, the Washington Capitals had sent Clay Stevenson down to Hershey, had recalled Garen Bjorklund up because of the roster rules and stuff like that. The reason for that is that if Clay Stevenson stays on longer, the number of days before he needs to go through waivers again kicks in. So they had to send him down. So there could be a chance where it's like, yeah, we might, if Lindgren isn't ready to rock and roll by the time the Olympic break is over, I don't be surprised if you see Garen Bjorklund being the one backing up Logan Thompson, because of the fact that Bjorklund does not need waivers to go back to the AHL. Whereas if Stevenson has to stay for an extended period of time, he will need to require waivers to go back. And somebody will most likely try to claim Stevenson. There's actually talk during training camp about the possibility of Stevenson being one of the goalies to be claimed when he had to be sent back down to Hershey because they obviously couldn't keep him. Luckily, it was Caden Premu who got claimed on waivers that day and not Clay Stevenson. So it was, so that's something that a lot of people have to keep an eye on too, is that if Lindgren's not available, it could be Bjorklund being the backup because waivers do play a factor in that.
Waivers are terrifying. Like, even the Caps losing Vincent Iorio earlier this year to the Sharks off of waivers, the kind of deal where who knows, he could have been a piece to the future. I know you got Cole Hudson, the big name coming up.
Yeah.
But you also, it's smaller names are going to make out the team. Like Matt Roy is not going to make an all-star team, but yet he's part of the reason the Caps win games. And so it's tough to lose that part of the puzzle. And knowing that, sure, you have Thompson for 6 years, but you do have Lindgren, who's a little bit. He's also older, like Thompson, but he's only on a 3-year deal. You might need Stevenson because you might see him as he's not just the goalie who's going to come in and play a few games this season. He could be in 4 years playing half the games for the Caps.
Well, the problem with that is, and this is like for any team when it comes to goaltending, is, we have Thompson for six years. He's in that first year of his 6-year contract. Lindgren's in the first year of that 3-year contract. If you feel confident enough, if the Capitals brass feel confident enough in saying, Clay Stevenson is that next guy, he's the new future backup, what then happens to Charlie Lindgren? The obvious answer to that would be, okay, well, we would have to trade him and move him to make room to make Clay Stevenson the full-time backup goaltender. But then you have Garen Bjorklund on the up and up as well. And then one thing that the Capitals have been really, really good at has been drafting goaltenders. I mean, Philip Grubauer, Semyon Varlamov, Michael Neuwirth, obviously Braden Holtby, Olaf Kolzig, who I mentioned earlier, was a Capitals draft pick. So it's like, you have all these guys that the Capitals have been doing such a great job of drafting and developing that, you kind of put yourself in a weird thing. And nothing against LT, but I've always had a thing where goalies should not be signed to contracts more than 3 years because of just the volatility to the position, especially in this day and age. It's not the same way as it was when you had Martin Brodeur, Olaf Kolzig, Grant Fuhr, Patrick Waugh, Dominic Hasek, where essentially every team had a legit number one goalie and a number one goalie for years. It's a lot different than it was back then to how it is today, especially with the goaltending position.
So if the Capitals were to trade Charlie Lindgren, what kind of value do you think that we would have on him? Because he's shown that he can be a starting goaltender in this league.
See, that's the thing. It's really hard because he's got 2 years left on his contract. So you have to look at the contract, you have to look at the term and the money, and you have to look at the demand of who needs goaltending. Obviously, number one that always comes up when it comes to goaltending is the Edmonton Oilers.
Yeah.
But the thing is that what are you going to really be able to get out of Edmonton, especially when they did the Tristan Jarry for Stuart Skinner swap earlier this season. So, so like right now, I don't think there's going to be any question or debate of like, oh, we have to move Charlie Lindgren now to bring up Clay Stevenson. That's probably going to be a conversation maybe next season, close to the trade deadline, or after next season during the off season. That's probably when that debate, and I'd have to look it up, what Clay Stevenson's contract status is right now, which I'm doing right now. Just to have an idea, because that's how you would know what you would potentially be dealing with. So he's actually in year 2 of 3 of his contract right now. So he has 1 year left on his contract, Clay Stevenson does. So in theory, the Capitals, and he's when his contract expires, he'll be 28 years old. So that's the other thing you have to look at for Stevenson. Now, granted, goalies do take a little longer to develop for the NHL. So you would have to look at it from the perspective of, do the Capitals re-sign him? Do they view him? Because you also have Mitch Gibson in the prospect pool. Antoine Keller, who played for France today against Canada, is a Capitals goaltending prospect. So you have others in the pipeline too. So there's definitely going to be a lot of questions definitely going into next summer rather than this
Yeah.
summer when it comes to
So
Clay
it's
Stevenson and Charlie Lindgren. So that's why I would pump the brakes right now, but really look at it more going at maybe trade deadline of 2027, offseason 2027, where you may have to start making those type of decisions.
So honestly, the Caps found themselves in a great spot. We can just enjoy the goaltending we're going to get right now. We can worry about the bigger questions in about a year or so. At the start of the season, in one of our episodes, Adam and I made bold predictions for the Caps. My bold prediction this year was Lindgren gets traded because he's shown that he's good enough to be a number one goaltender. And I think that some teams might find the 2 years on the contract appealing, knowing we have a great goaltender that we can lock down for 2 years if we have the money space for it. So obviously that might not happen this season, but with the prospect pool the Caps are working with Clay Stevenson, Garen Bjorklund, it looks like that Charlie Lindgren might become a trade asset, similar to the conversation that was regarding Ethen Frank when he started to heat up this year. And that's another player I wanted to talk about. Ethen
So
Frank has
real
stood
quick,
out to me.
before you hop to Frank, I just pulled this up on Charlie Lindgren real quick. Lindgren currently is 32 years old, and he has a $3 million cap hit. When his contract expires, he'll be 34. So he's in that prime range right now for a goaltender. But the question becomes is that, one, if you're the Capitals, you don't want to be eating salary for the next 2 years. You don't want to be taking like say 25% or 50% of that cap hit for the next 2 years if you were to trade him, which I don't see, like I said, I don't see happening. But at the same time, you need to see if there's a team that can, because there's a lot of teams that do spend to the cap and they need to be able to take on that $3 million cap hit. So that's just, something that needs to have a little bit of perspective on that. But go ahead
Absolutely.
about Ethen Frank.
Yeah, Ethan Frank, I think, kind of flew under everyone's radar last season. And if you didn't know about him before, which I did not, you absolutely knew him. Everyone knows fast skater, got great hands. This year he showed he's got that goal scorer's touch. And last season he plays 24 games, 4 goals, 3 assists. This season he's played double the games, 48. He has almost 3 times the amount of goals and 4 times the amount of assists. 11 goals, 12 assists so far this year. And I think that deserves to be recognized because Ethen Frank, nobody thinks of him as he's the guy. But I think that he absolutely should be seen in that light. He's showed that when he gets the minutes and gets the opportunities, he's able to make something out of it. And that's different from what we've seen maybe out of Milano and Lapierre, which we can talk about in a second. The 3 of them were all kind of shipped into the same boat. The young, fast guys who haven't really proven themselves, so they're going to get 5 minutes a night, and maybe one of them could stick around. Ethen Frank took that opportunity, was able to get net front presence, score a lot of goals, and he's been playing 12 minutes a night recently. Meanwhile, Lapierre and Milano still have not been able to reach double-digit minutes consistently or at all this season. So it really goes to that opportunistic mentality that Frank has been able to get. And I know, Adam, you're a big Ethen Frank guy as well, so I'm wondering your thoughts. How has Ethen Frank been able to take 5 minutes a night and in turn make it onto our list of the top 6 players on the Caps right now?
He took advantage of his opportunities. Obviously, the Capitals have had a lot of injuries this season, and some big ones at that. With Pierre-Luc Dubois going down for a good amount of time, Leonard going down, Nick Michael down right now, and he just took advantage. He was on the first line power play for a good amount of time, second line power play. He moved his way up into the line standings, and Ethen Frank was able to find that confidence after scoring a couple goals, finding his path in the cap, getting more minutes. And as people have come back, he's still stayed in that range because he's playing with this confidence that he gained from that opportunity when people were injured.
Yeah, and the piggyback off that, there's a saying, because I play hockey myself.
So do
And
I, yeah.
yeah, so it's like,
Yeah.
when I played ice hockey, I was a third, fourth line grinder. I wasn't getting a lot of minutes. Ball hockey is a little different. I'm more of a first line, forward. How different it could be when you're running compared to ice skating. But there's a saying of like, you got to maximize your minutes. And Ethen Frank is a guy who goes out there and maximizes his minutes. He could play 5 minutes and still come up with a goal and an assist, or an assist and 3 shots on goal and 2 big hits in 5 minutes. And that's maximizing the minutes, which is to Carberry and the coaching staff is going to go, hey, we can move this guy up in our lineup because every time we know we put him on the ice, he's going to maximize his minutes. when it comes to Hendrix Lapierre, obviously he's on a 1-year prove-it contract, and he proved it during training camp, but he ain't proven it during the regular season. There were little spurts in the beginning of the season where I think it was him, Frank, and maybe even Milano, they were aligned together at one point. And like that one game, I think they combined for like 6 points, and they only played like 7 minutes each. And it was like, and I remember having this conversation with somebody on Twitter, is like, because they maximized their minutes that game. They took what they were given and they made the most of it. I've had this conversation multiple times with some of my friends in the press especially on the Cap side. Ted Starkey being one of them. If you ever watch my podcast or listen to my podcast, The More Phenomenal Hockey Show, yes, that is a Power Ranger reference in the name. We've talked about it where, it's a shame Nashville's playing better now, because there was talk that, or at least a thing out there that like, oh, maybe the Caps could trade Hendrix Lapierre to the Nashville Predators for Ryan O'Reilly. Because O'Reilly's that type of player that the Capitals kind of need for the playoffs. He's a rugged center who can, play big minutes and play in big situations. He's won a Stanley Cup with the St. Louis Blues. And it also helps Nashville because they need to get younger, and Lapierre would be a good answer for that. Obviously, Nashville's playing a lot better, so that trade probably doesn't make sense at this point now. Milano's a guy, he has to go on waivers and he has to clear it, but he's a guy who I don't see getting claimed on waivers where Lapierre would, because Lapierre is 24 years old and Milano is 29.
With injury history.
With an injury history. So Milano going down to the minors would probably make a lot more sense. And that would be the opportunity to really bring up Ilya Protas, Andrew Crystal, Ivan Miroshnichenko, and give them a little bit of a longer leash. And as Starkey has said on my podcast before, inject some youthful energy into the lineup, which is something that this team desperately needs as well. Because, we got Dubois back. It's great that he's back, and that's going to shore up a lot of problems down the middle for the Capitals. But we still need that youthful injection of energy in the Caps lineup. And Frank is doing it. Milano is obviously not going to be the answer on that one because he's 29 and he really isn't producing as much. But then Lapierre, who is the youngest of the bunch, because Frank is 28, that kid needs, as we put it sometimes, a change of scenery,
I want to say, with the whole talk of the trades and possibly O'Reilly, probably not going to happen. But would you see the Capitals right now heading into the trade deadline, looking at a spot right now just out of the playoffs, right behind Columbus? The Capitals with a good chance, even though we've played the most amount of games so far in the NHL. If the Capitals, you see them being more buyers, sellers, maybe not making a move. Because I have seen some rumors, maybe like someone like on the Blues, like Jordan Kyrou or something. There was something, Artemi Panarin, obviously he didn't go to the Caps, he went to the Kings.
Thank God he did not go to the Caps. I did not want him. I did not want Quinn Hughes either. I'm glad both of them did not go to the Capitals.
I'm curious about that, actually. Well, why don't you think Quinn Hughes would have been an appropriate fit for the Caps' needs?
One, we have a saying about certain defensemen that are really forwards, and that's what Quinn Hughes is. He's really a forward that's on defense. He's a defensive he's a defensive liability. Chychrun's not a defensive liability, though.
That's true. That's true.
Quinn Hughes is a defensive liability. Luke Hughes of the Devils is a defensive liability on his team. You look at somebody like Matt Roy, and Matt Roy, actually, I've been very surprised with Roy a lot this season because I've noticed he's been doing a lot more pinching into the offensive zone, getting more into the offensive play and stuff like that. But what's the number one thing that he always is when he's doing that? Being defensively responsible and getting back after he's been part of that little bit of a push, gets back on defense. A guy like Quinn Hughes, and I've said this about Erik Karlsson, I've said this about Mike Green, I've said this about Chris Letang. These guys are forwards who are on defense. They are not solid defensemen. They're really forwards that are on defense because they are really good puck movers. And we don't need Quinn Hughes, because here's the thing. When I look at the Capitals roster as is right now, not that version, but I'm going to go to this version. When I look on defense, we have Chikrin, we have Roy, we have Farivari, we have Chisholm, and we got McElrath. TVR is in the last year of his deal. John Carlson is in the last year of his deal. And then we also have Rasmus Sandin. It sounds like Carlson's going to re-sign. For how many years, we don't know, but I've heard 3 years as a max, which I think would probably be a safe signing for Carlson, is no more than 3 years. I think Rasmus Sandin might get traded at the deadline to make room for Cole Hudson. And that's the other reason why I would not want Quinn Hughes, because we have Cole Hudson coming in. You need to make room for him. If you bring in a guy like Quinn Hughes, how are you going to make room for Cole Hudson? Because I'm not moving Chikrin. I'm not moving Matt Roy or Martin Farivari, because Matt Roy and Martin Farivari are two top defensive defensemen. You need them. I wouldn't necessarily move Trevor Van Riemsdyk, because he is a defensive defenseman who has also won a Stanley Cup. A lot of people forgot he won a Stanley Cup with Chicago in the last Stanley Cup that they won. Chisholm, you just literally traded for during the offseason from Minnesota, and he's a young guy at 26 years old, so that's somebody you can build off of. And you want to keep McElrath for the size for the playoffs, in case you ever need to inject some size into your lineup for the playoffs. So when I look at it and I break this down, Rasmus Sandin's the odd man out, and if you traded Sandin for Quinn Hughes, then where are you putting Cole Hudson? Because I'm not giving up my defensive defenseman, because you need them in the playoffs. So you see where I kind of leverage a lot of that, for like in that outside of me just not being a big Quinn Hughes fan.
And Cole Hudson's a very offensive defenseman too, though, right?
Yeah. So think his brother Lane, but potentially a lot better.
Yeah, no, I was able to see him play at Boston. I went to a BU game earlier this year. I was able to see him. I think 2 years ago, I also went to a game, and he seemed like the best player on the ice by far. Like these college guys, like they look a little bit less. They look worse than obviously the NHL players and what we're used to seeing. But Cole Hudson, you could just tell the way he skated, the way he moved the puck. He looked just a lot better and a lot more like ready for the NHL. So are you saying you see Cole Hudson after the college season being called up to the Capitals at the end of the season?
Yeah, I think that's the game. I think that's been the game plan since he committed to going back for his sophomore year. Just kind of like how it was with Ryan Leonard. He did his freshman year. And then he said, you know what? I want to go back because I have some unfinished business. He went back, he finished business. And then, he finished business one way or the other. But then he signed with the Capitals once his season was over. And that's the same route as Cole Hudson right here. Cole Hudson is, I see Cole Hudson being on the Washington Capitals, in March, which is when and keep this in mind, the 25th of February, the Caps play their first game back from the Olympic break. That's a Wednesday.
Flyers.
Yeah, that's a Wednesday. Forget the opponent. That's a Wednesday. The following Friday, March 6th, is the trade deadline. So there's a week and a half after the season resumes until the trade deadline. So so you have maybe I don't have the schedule in front of me, but you have maybe 6 games to tell your general manager, Chris Patrick, what is going to be happening. Are we going to be sellers and get ready for the future, or are we going to be buying to try to do a deep playoff run, and stuff like that. So those are type of things that we have to look into in that week and a half coming out of the Olympic break.
And the reason I do mention that it is the Flyers too is because you're playing a lot of Metro teams in the first week back. You got Vegas in there. You got some teams outside of the Metropolitan Division. You're playing a few Metropolitan Division games. That's where your playoff chances are lying the most, honestly. You definitely have a wide open shot at third place, even second place. I think it's a stretch to catch the Hurricanes at this point for first. You also have the wild card open right now. So it's so important because when you play a team in the wild card race with you, it's a 4-point game. We're going to move up. We're going to move up too. We're not going to let them.
I'll put this out there. There's only one 4-point game when they come
Is it the
back from the break.
Flyers?
It's the Flyers.
Okay.
Then they play Vegas. Then they play Montreal. Then they play Utah. Then it's the trade deadline. So the
Which is
Capitals.
4, okay.
So the Capitals only. I thought it would have been more, but then I just pulled up the schedule to look at it. But yeah, so there's only 4 games for the Capitals to kind of go, to tell Chris Patrick what type of team they could potentially be going into the trade deadline. And, going to Panarin real quick, I'm glad the Caps didn't pick him up. He's not somebody the Capitals need. I did not like the things I was hearing about the contract extension, but also something that was brought up to me. When we hear somebody like Elliot Friedman of the 32 Thoughts podcast, Hockey Night in Canada, and he's going out talking about, oh, the Capitals, this is the potential offer that the Capitals could be doing, or for Quinn Hughes, or the Capitals are very interested in doing a contract negotiation with Panarin and signing him to this long-term deal. A lot of that stuff that Friedman's saying isn't coming from the teams. It's coming from the agent of the players. And it's being done as a tactic to push up the value of what the player could get. Now, for Quentin Hughes, he didn't have much say about where he would go, outside if he wanted to go to New Jersey to be with his brothers, but a lot of people would be like, there's tampering there. But when it came to Panarin, he had so much more control on where he wanted to go. So when I hear the thing of him going, I just want to go to Los Angeles and Los Angeles only, I believe that more than the fact that the Capitals were interested in Artemi Panarin. Plus, Panarin can become very lazy.
Yeah.
I think he's one of the biggest reasons why, outside of management for the Rangers, which is a whole nother conversation there. They need to clean house of their management. But I feel like Panarin's one of the cancers that's kind of in that locker room, along with JT Miller. And,
I agree with JT Miller too.
And why would you want to bring somebody into your locker room that's not going to have the mentality that you're really going to want to have? If he wants to go out to LA, originally he wanted to just be with in Florida with the Panthers or the Lightning, but neither team could make that work. And it's like, yeah, he wants to go there because, it's the sunny beaches and all this other stuff. Well, next natural place is go to California, which is where you also have beaches and stuff like that. So it's like, he's the type of player I just wouldn't want to have on my team. I don't think he would be a good fit, personally. And, it's one of those guys who I'm glad that he didn't go to the Capitals. I think the Capitals need to get younger too. And Panarin would not have fit that bill for getting younger. That's where Ilya Protas, Andrew Crystal, Ivan Mershchenko, Bogdan Triniev, these are the guys who we need to be getting plugged into our lineup to get younger and better for the future, and so Panarin would never have fit into that model.
If the Caps were to buy at the trade deadline, is there anybody specific you think that the Capitals should target or they would target?
It's really tough because, outside of a couple teams, this has been the most parity-driven season in the NHL. When you look at the pull up by division, when you look at, outside of the Rangers, who are clearly out of it now and they're kind of in a sell mode, there's not a lot of guys who I want to touch on the Rangers anyways. I wouldn't want Mika Zibanejad. He's old. He's older. He's a guy who, yeah, he could probably be a good third line guy, but not for the money he's making. St. Louis, you brought up Jordan Kyrou. That's a guy who I would probably look into. He's still a very young player. He has a lot of offensive or potential upside and stuff like that. So Kyrou would be a good player to bring in. If you're looking purely at a rental, I'd have to look at his contract, but I think Braden Shen would be a nice little rental piece because he brings that grit, to the lineup every game. And it's somebody who, and this is somebody who a lot of people have not been talking about, but Brandon Duhaime is in the last year of his contract for the Capitals too. So this could be maybe one of those things of what do the Capitals do with Duhaime? And, so it's like, it's really hard. like even looking at the standings right now and just seeing how things are playing out, it's just the parity is just too much, and like a lot of teams within your own division aren't going to trade with you, especially if there's the possibility of like, oh, we could potentially play these guys in the first or second round of the playoffs. So it's hard to gauge. Um,
Yeah,
but
I think the most likely team, if we're gonna make a trade and make a splash, I think the Blues are probably at the top of that list, just because they suck this year, to be honest, and they have.
I mean, we
They're
could say the
obviously,
same about Vancouver and the
yeah.
Rangers too.
I
So
mean, we could say other teams, but I know they're gonna sell, and I know they don't see anything right now in a lot of their players for the future.
So one team that's interesting that to be keeping an eye on is the Calgary Flames, because they got Barclay Goodrow, they got Nazem Kadri. I think Kadri still has some term. Goudreau might have an extra year on his contract, but obviously Goudreau is a 2-time Stanley Cup champion with the New Jersey, or with not with New Jersey, but with the Tampa Bay Lightning. Kadri obviously won the Cup with Colorado. He's that type of sandpaper player that, you can compare it a little bit to Tom Wilson in a way. So those are guys that maybe you would want to try to bring in just because, they have that playoff experience, and they have, they have, that's 3 Stanley Cups between 2 guys. But the question then becomes, if I trade for these guys, who am I giving up in return? And that's the real problem, because outside of Milano and LaPierre and in my book, Rasmus Sandin, because you got Cole Hudson coming in, who do you really try to move from the lineup?
And
Because a
that's
lot of
when I was
people may not be touching Milano. A lot of guys may not be wanting to touch LaPierre. They may want to wait for free agency to take on those type of guys. So it's really tough to try to figure that out, because you have to look at your roster and go, who am I going to trade?
And that's something that I thought of too when you were talking about why Quinn Hughes doesn't belong in DC. The names that were getting floated out there too that you would give up were guys like Ryan Leonard, guys like even Cole Hudson. I saw those names get thrown out there.
Oh,
And
one
at that,
one of the offers I saw, and I just laughed at it, and I just yelled an expletive really loud with the word off afterwards. It was Martin Ferivari, Connor McMichael, Cole Hudson, and a first round pick. To
get
which
out.
my response was, "Oh, off." So that was my response.
But
Because that trade makes no sense for the Capitals. Why are you trading your top defenseman, a young guy who is, that is still versatile within in the middle 6 for the Capitals, and Connor McMichael? You're going to give up your future on Cole Hudson? That makes no sense.
and that's exactly what I was getting into. And I said that those were the names getting thrown out. It makes no sense. Not even, oh, we don't even need him based on our roster. We're not giving up those guys, because we were also talking about Ethan Frank, Ryan Leonard, injecting the youth. The youth is what's going to carry these Caps. And Adonai, something we've focused on this year is complacency in a sense for some players in the Caps. Obviously, Ovechkin, he's a great player, arguably, and in my opinion, the greatest goal scorer of all time. Sometimes he goes through those quiet stretches where maybe he's not skating as hard. And then there's also the games where he's net front, skating hard, throwing hits. So one thing I want to get your opinion on is, obviously it's tough when you're 40 to play in the NHL. What are the kind of things that the Caps maybe need to do to get a full locker room effort on every game?
Man, that's a great question. Well, number one, there needs to be a conversation with Ovi. Hopefully we hear something coming out of the break about what Ovechkin's going to be doing, after the season. Is this the last season, or is he going to re-sign for one more? We need an answer on that, because the more that continues to linger, the more harder it's going to be to kind of gauge certain things. But one thing that I would also do in that conversation is say, listen, you can't play the full 2 minutes of the power play. We need to change this power play up excessively, because they're still playing Blaine Forsythe power play hockey, and Blaine Forsythe power play hockey sucks. the slingshot, the
I hate the
horrible
slingshot.
the horrible, like, I know how to defend against a slingshot. At the moment I see a defenseman do it, I am charging that defenseman and
Yeah.
after that puck. Edmonton does that to us every time we play them, and they do that stupid play. But you got to get rid of the slingshot. You got to do better zone entries on your power play. You need to inject. There's a saying when Fred Shearer was the coach of the Philadelphia Flyers,
And also on the power play, stop playing two defenders on the power play. I hate that. When we do
no,
Chikrin
that's
and
perfectly.
Carlson, I don't love Carlson the power play. This is not my favorite.
That part doesn't bother me as much. But like I was saying, there's a saying that Fred Shearer has when he was coaching the Flyers back in the 70s. Obviously, won the cup since 1974, 1975, and the rule of thumb that he always had is the puck always moves forward, it never moves backwards. What does the slingshot do? It moves the puck backwards, not forwards. Plus, not only that, but you're allowing the other team's penalty killers to get in position to choke you out of being able to do a clean zone entry. I loved it when we had Braden Holtby in goal because Holtby would see it and he would go, oh, hell nah. And then he would just shoot the puck down the ice to one of our forwards to generate a better break-in into the zone, and then the guys would just rush in and attack. It's like you need more attacking, and there's not enough attacking. Plus, if you also and I have the benefit of doing this as a season ticket holder to the Capitals too, so I'm able to watch all these different teams' power plays in person, up close and personal. And the one thing I notice is that like the teams who have the really good power plays move the puck really fast and they make the penalty killers move to get out of position so they can get those really good quality scoring opportunities on goal. Case in point, look at Edmonton with Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. Look at how those guys are able to move the puck around and get the puck on net. Like I had one where Leon Draisaitl is standing literally right in front of me. I'm up in 420, but he's still right there in front of me, wide open because all the penalty killers are scrambled from all that puck movement that the Oilers are doing. Boom. He gets a pass from Connor McDavid and scores right on the doorstep. And that's the type of stuff that the Capitals need to be doing. But the problem is that when you have Ovechkin playing the full 2 minutes, that eats up some opportunities there to really move things around a lot better because of how Ovi plays the power play and stuff like that. And that's why he needs to be sat down and said, listen, you can't play full 2 minutes. We'll put you out there to start a power play, but we need to get a second unit out there that plays the power play differently from how the first unit plays the power play at the same time.
Which is why, enter enter Frank, enter Leonard on that power play. I've always this season liked the second power play unit more because at least they have a 5-man weave going. They're loading up with speed. A lot of times what happens, especially, is maybe Chikrin carries the puck all the way up the ice. You have 4 people sitting on the blue line waiting, no speed coming in. We dump in, turn it over, it's cleared, and now we burn off 25 seconds.
Yeah, and by the way, you mentioned Justin Sordiff. I am loving Justin Sordiff this
He's
season.
great.
I
He's great.
remember they made the trade and I reached out to Starkey and I said, "Hey, what can you tell me about Sordiff?" And he goes, "Well, in the AHL Calder Cup playoffs, he was a very good offensive player. He hustles, he works hard along the boards, he does all the little things." And then I end up going to the Caps preseason game in Hershey and he played in that game and I go, okay, Crystal's playing, so obviously that's one player I'm going to keep an eye on this game. And the other guy was Justin Sordiff. And I was like, okay, I see what Starkey's talking about. Like, I like what I'm seeing. And that was it, just in a preseason game. And he has, the sky's the limit for him. And I'm super happy that he's having the season that he's has. He almost was rookie of the month for January. He was just edged out by Fraser Minton of the Bruins for it. But, Sordiff is doing a great job, and I'm loving every minute of it. And that schmuck Ian from Russian Machine doesn't know what he's talking about when it comes to Sordiff.
Josh, I was telling you too when we first got him. I was telling you like this is going to be on one of our first episodes of the podcast. I'm saying Sordiff is going to be that enforcer. He's going to be that forechecking guy, and he has a lot more than just that. Like sky's the limit for him, and I wasn't expecting him to be this good this early into his tenure with the Capitals. But I'm loving what I'm seeing from him as well.
Well, we kind of seen that with Carberry, where he gets a new toy and he figures out how to make the new toy fit in with all the other toys on in the group. And and I want to say sort of as an enforcer, I would probably go more, he's more of a grinder. He's a really good grinding type of player kind of like the way Nick Dowd's a really good grinder, and in a way Frank is a really good grinder of a player too. Because I wouldn't put him as like a dangler playmaker type guy. Because Frank does all those little things that Sordiff and Dowd do as well.
And that's exactly what Adam and I talked about on our last installment of the podcast. Was sometimes it's not about, oh, I made this great play, it's going to end up on top 10, but it's I made life hard for the other team. And that's a lot of times what that Dowd forecheck line does. They're not maybe enforcers, but they're grinders. And sure, maybe we don't get a lot of prolonged zone time, but what we do is we make it hard for them to get out of their zone. By the time they get out, all they can do is dump and chase. So it's just sometimes about how can I make life as hard as possible, not how can I make this play, make this beautiful behind the back pass, which is another thing that the Caps do way too much, the blind behind the back pass.
Yeah, I do agree with that. Actually, in thinking about it, one of the guys who I really loved, even though he was only with the Caps for a very, very brief time, but when the Capitals had Esa Tikkanen for the 98 Cup run, the Cup final run, like he made people miserable. Like the series against Ottawa in the second round, Alexei Yashin, like he couldn't do anything because of Esa Tikkanen just hounding him and just chirping him in his Tikkanese, which is like half English, half Finnish, whatever he's trying to say, gibberish, and it's like he's just frustrating guys. And then again in like Buffalo, he's just frustrating the Sabres top players. And, that's the type of stuff that you need to, to essentially win cups, because Tikkanen won, I believe, like 5 Stanley Cups, 4 with the Oilers and 1 with the Rangers. So, that, which is why the Caps brought him in for that year. So
was he similar to like a Nikita Zadorov type with the chirping?
I think Tikkanen is in a league of his own.
Oh yeah, okay.
From the articles that I read and the interviews that I've seen and heard, Tikkanen is on a league of his own, because most of the time you wouldn't even know what the hell that guy was saying.
I only ask because I'm not too familiar. It sounds like you are pretty familiar with hockey. So we're actually getting into a game we play called Career Path, where Adam's going to give you a player and the teams that he played for, and you're going to have to tell him the player.
God.
Yeah, I was unaware of your knowledge of the Capitals, so I think this might be a little bit too. Maybe a little bit too easy for you.
I will throw this out there. So I'm 39 years old. I'll be 40 later this year. Alex Ovechkin is literally 1 year and 2 weeks older than I am. We were both eligible for the 2004 NHL draft. He obviously went number 1 and I went undrafted. Rightfully so. But like, I've always billed myself as a hockey fan first and a Caps fan second. I've been playing hockey literally since September of 92 when I was 5 years old. Like, I was born into hockey. I've been going the game since I was like 2. So
let's go with the harder player, Adam.
Or as I put it in layman terms, I have no life.
All right, so our harder player, as we say, probably still going to be too easy for you, but we'll. And just the base, this player has to have played for the Capitals. So
okay.
What the game we play, it's called Career Path. I'm gonna give you.
Is it Jaromir Jagr?
It is not where this player played. Those his position, and then you'll have to tell me exactly who the player is. All right, so I'm gonna start off. He started his career with the Capitals from 2013 up until about 2017, and then 2017 through 2020 he was with the Vegas Golden Knights.
Chandler Stevenson.
It is not Chandler Stevenson. I'll tell you, from 2020 to 2021, he was with the Vancouver Canucks, and then from 2021 through 2024 with Winnipeg, and then
Nate Schmidt.
Yep, Nate Schmidt. All right, I didn't even get there to the end.
I threw the Stevenson out there just to mess with you, just to see what I can do to rattle you, and it didn't work, but. Yeah, no, because that's right, because Schmidt went in the expansion draft to Vegas.
Yeah.
Which was the interesting thing, because in that expansion draft, everyone thought that Vegas was going to take Grubauer.
Yeah.
And then they pulled the swerve and they picked Schmidt. And what ended up happening is former Capitals general manager, who was the general manager of the Knights for that expansion draft, he ended up drafting all these defensemen. And everyone's like, man, what's going on here? And then you end up finding out that he was kind of dicking around the other general managers. So when he was supposed to try to flip some of these defensemen for other things, the other GMs were like, "No, we're not gonna work with you. You're stuck with all these defensemen now." So
And
It
then the
worked out
Caps
for the
go on to
Vegas.
beat the Golden Knights.
yeah,
But it did work out for them though, winning a Stanley Cup not too long after they started their expansion.
yeah, it took them 5 years, but yeah, they did it.
That's pretty. I would say that's pretty quick though to start
Although
a,
at the same
start a
time,
team.
one thing I will give Bill Foley, the owner of the Golden Knights, credit on is that he said by year 5 they would win the Stanley Cup, and they did it in year 5. So he set a goal for that franchise, and he achieved that goal with the franchise. So, hats off to Foley. I mean, there's questions about salary cap circumventions and stuff like that. I mean, say you can go with Tampa Bay, but at least you still got to give them props where props are due.
So we've talked about some players, talked about the league. Right now, the Caps sit 29, 23, and 7. They've played 59 games so far in the season, and they're going to play 82 in the end, right? What is
I
the
hope
number
they play
one
82 in the end.
Well, I would hope so. I would be amazed if they did not. But what is the number one thing that the Caps need to continue doing, and the number one thing the Caps need to improve on in order to make the Stanley Cup playoffs, and not only make the playoffs, but do well in the playoffs?
I'm going to go with the thing they need to improve on the most, and that's their special teams. Power play is not doing great. The penalty kill is not where it should be. Those are two of the most important things that you need to be successful in the playoffs. If your power play is not producing, there's a thing my dad said, and that is that no matter what, you want your power play and your penalty kill percentages to total more than 100. If they are not totaling more than 100%, then you're going to be in trouble, especially when it comes to the playoffs. You can play great 5-on-5 all you want, but if your special teams ain't clicking, especially if you're going on the penalty kill a lot, or you get a lot of power play opportunities and you're just not capitalizing on those opportunities, or in the case of the penalty killing, just tiring out your penalty killers like nonstop by taking a lot of penalties, it's not going to be a very successful run. So that's really the number one thing they need to improve upon. I definitely think with Pierre-Luc Dubois coming back into the lineup, we saw that in the game against Nashville, where he injected that, really showing what he brings to the table and what the Capitals have been missing on the ice, with that second line center role, what he brings to the power play, what he brings to penalty killing. So hopefully that will, reinvigorate things coming out of the break. What was the other one? What they needed? I did the improvement one.
What they need to continue doing well.
What they need to continue doing well is keep playing well 5-on-5, keeping the goalies able to see everything, cut down on the quality shots, and making it more quantity, where the goalies can, make those easier saves and not have to maybe take a puck off of the camera hole and do a weird bounce into the goal.
That was crazy when that happened.
Yeah.
Apparently they're saying that's how Lindgren got hurt initially.
Really?
That's what they're saying, but I don't believe it, because he looked fine after that. It was the thing that happened at the end of overtime. That looked like it got him.
The fact that he stayed in, we won that shootout game, like, that was insane to me, because we never win the shootouts either. We never do.
Yeah, if we're gonna do it, our goalie's gonna be hurt. Let's do it.
Yeah,
and I'll be honest, Adam and I were actually at prom that night. We stopped everything to watch the third period overtime in that shootout, and we went insane with our friends when we were all watching. They won the shootout, because honestly, it shouldn't be that crazy when the Caps win a shootout, but when you go 0-6 on the year in the shootout, and then you win one with a goalie who can barely even move, it's unbelievable.
Yeah. Oh, one of the greatest. So, like, when I'm at the games, obviously you've seen my content. It's the videos of the players doing the walkout for pregame. And then I want to address this to the people watching this. Yes, I do understand that the video I post during the first intermission of Logan Thompson is not during the intermission. I shoot that during the pregame warmups. Please just enjoy the content. Thank you very much. But one of the things I also do is I film the fights. I film the penalty shots in the game against Anaheim. That was so insane being at that game. All we were missing was a goalie fight and a goalie goal. That's all we needed. Just give us those two.
It was the perfect.
It
It was the perfect response to the first Anaheim game this season.
Well, yeah, but the thing is that but then I also will do the shootouts, and I'll clip all the videos together, and I'll just post it up as one big video. And somebody went, "Man, you must be a true masochist to be be wanting to post the shootout because they're all losses." And I go, "It's content, baby." It's all content. So, but yeah, that's just the thing there. It's just but like, yeah, it's one of those deals where you also have to figure out. I personally, I hate the shootout. I hate ending games on a skills competition, essentially, and one that, as we've seen, the Capitals are just not good at, or just the players that we could constantly roll out are just not good at. So I love the fact that, what was it? It was, we had 3 straight. Ryan Leonard was one of the guys, and that's what you got to do. You got to really change it up.
I think.
Yeah, Beauvillier, and I think it was Strome, Beauvillier, and Leonard were the 3, I think. And that's what you got to do. You got to put these guys in, who don't do a lot of these, because let's also be honest, when they do their tape and they go, oh, if we go to a shootout, these are the guys to look for. Well, if you start putting out guys that they're not expecting, that will help your odds a little bit more, because hey, we didn't have tape on Anthony Beauvillier doing shootouts. We didn't have tape on Ryan Leonard doing shootouts, or Alexei Protas doing shootouts. And they're being thrown out for a shootout. Now you just threw the other team for a loop, going like, okay, the goalie wasn't ready for these type of shooters. They're ready for like an Alex Ovechkin, type guy to come at them.
Just no more John Carlson on the shootout ever.
Yeah, please, no more.
I will say this. I do love throwing a defenseman out on the shootout every now and then. I don't care which defenseman it is. It could be Carlson. It could be
Carlson.
No. Hear me out. It can be Carlson. It could be Chychrun. It could be Roy. It could be Fairvart. I don't care which one, because nobody has tape on a defenseman doing a shootout, unless they're Erik Karlsson, Chris Letang, or Brent Burns, or maybe even Quinn Hughes. Outside that, how many defensemen are literally used in shootouts all the time?
Pretty much none. I would love to see Sandin. I've always thought that Sandin is a little bit underappreciated from what I've heard.
I do agree with that.
I think that he's incredibly shifty and has great hands and great movement on the ice. And then he's also a great lockdown defensive presence.
Yeah, no, like Sandin, I do like Sandin as a defenseman. It's just, unfortunately, like I mentioned earlier, with with Cole Hudson coming in, it's like, who do you move? And I think one of the reasons that they're going to re-sign Karlsson to at least a 2-3 year deal is to be a mentor to Hudson.
Yeah.
That's the only reason why because other than that, we could easily bring in Hudson, not trade anybody, because then, we're parting ways with Karlsson. But if Karlsson's going to stay on and be a mentor to Hudson for like those first couple of years, yeah, you got to trade somebody. And, unfortunately, it's going to be, Sandin in my book. Sorry to all my friends who are very upset about me saying that, but, I look at the business side of things. But not only that, but with TVR in the last year of his contract, with Chisholm and McElrath on for at least another year, I see Chisholm maybe more getting that opportunity as the 6th defenseman next season.
Because I was thinking a lot about TVR, and you were saying Sandin could be on his way out. I'm not going to lie. I like TVR. I think he's a great guy. I've never really seen the benefit and the appeal, at least in the last couple of seasons. Currently, of the main 6 defensemen on the Caps, he's the only one with a negative plus-minus. And obviously, if you're a defenseman, like, you will be there when goals get given up, especially you play more minutes than a forward might.
McElrath is a -1.
I guess.
McElrath's also not getting the minutes.
And TVR is a -5. But at the same time, when you look at who he's potentially out on the ice against, and stuff like that, or like, because like, here's the funny thing. When plus-minus is, I always kind of semi-disregard plus-minus for defensemen. I look at it more for forwards. And the reason I look at it more for forwards is because I want to see who is coming back defensively as a forward, because that is something, because it's a team game. When it comes to defensemen, it's harder to gauge how many of those are truly their fault. Because did they have the support of the forwards coming back on that particular play and stuff like that? Trust me, my plus minus was probably absolutely abysmal, and I was a forward for the most of my playing career in ice hockey. So it's like, and part of that is because I wasn't the best skater, so me getting back to be defensively responsible was not the best, so I left my defensemen out to dry a lot. I would like to greatly apologize to all of them. I will gladly buy you all Beavis and Butthead Valentine plushies as a makeup to that. So it's harder to gauge. Plus, it's only a -5. If he was like a -10, -15, then yeah, I would say, okay, something's not right here with TVR, but it's only a -5. That is something that could be easily reversible, in a couple games with him being on the ice for a lot of goals forward, at even strength. Plus, the bigger thing that you need to look at TVR for is not necessarily about what he's doing, like, especially offensively. He's not going to be like that offensive, bring a lot of offensive output. His key role is to be a shutdown defenseman and to be a penalty killer. And he does a pretty damn good job at both of those. Sure, he's getting up there. He's, in my opinion, the odd man out this offseason because you got Chisholm and you got McElrath for one more year after this season. And I think Chisholm's going to get that spot, to really showcase himself because he's a young guy. TVR doesn't bother me as much. I don't see myself ever stressed out when TVR is on the ice. McElrath, on the other hand, a little bit more stressed out.
Though I have seen
because he's not a strong skater.
Yeah,
I was going to say, because we could give up a goal, or we could also go down a man for 35 minutes due to some crazy penalties.
I mean, I'll give
his penalties are mostly fights, though, so it's like
I'll give McElrath credit. Like, the biggest thing, and one, he doesn't play a lot of minutes when he is in the lineup. But when he is put in the lineup, it's to neutralize certain guys like a Matt Rempe of the Rangers, or, a Matthew Tkachuk of the Panthers, who, guys who like to try to run around a little bit and mix things up. It's like you have a McElrath that can kind of go up and go, "Hi, how are you? My name is Dylan. Nice to meet you. You're going to calm down or we're going to drop the gloves because we don't want Tom fighting you because we want Tom on the ice." So I see the value in McElrath. I've never been the biggest. I'm still mad that we had him up in the roster over Ethen Bear. I think Ethen Bear should have been playing last year with the Capitals. Now he's with the Islanders, unfortunately. But, as long as he's playing and he's happy, that's all that matters. Because I got to chat with Ethen a little bit last year. So great guy. I just wish he was still with the Washington Capitals. I was super excited when they signed him. So...
And Adam and I were actually at that Predators game right before the break, and we were talking to a bunch of fans around us, and the exact thing that they were all saying is Wilson's got to stop taking these fights, because Wilson's like the leading goal scorer on the team right now. It can't be him sitting for 5. It needs to be a Duhaime, a McElrath, and the Nashville fans around us were saying, "Wilson, come on, drop the gloves, drop him. We don't want you on the ice anymore."
I understand that dilemma. And here's the thing. If McElrath's not in the lineup, who's the big guy in the lineup that can fight? It's not Duhaime. It's not Dowd.
They'll try.
I mean, Dowd does it. Dowd does fight.
No, Dowd and Duhaime both fight. But the thing is, though, is that if you have somebody who, is the size of Tom Wilson, or in the case of like that Tampa Bay fight with Douglas Curtis, who's 6'9", Nick Dowd ain't fighting a 6'9" dude. Brandon Duhaime is not fighting a 6'9" dude. We've seen what happened with Zdeno Chara fight somebody who's shorter than them. He just plays the bongos on him and go, "Very good. Please go to the penalty box with me." Because it's scary when Zdeno Chara fought this guy. But you're going to have Tom Wilson and you're going to have McElrath fight those guys. But the downside is that if McElrath's not in the lineup, Wilson's going to be the guy who has to fight those bigger guys. But if McElrath's in the lineup, then he's the guy who's going to go fight a Matt Rempe or a Douglas Curtis, because that's who he's there to neutralize. So it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't type of situation when it comes to Tom Wilson fighting, simply because of the fact that, you have to look at the opponent, who they have in the lineup. Do we want to put McElrath in the lineup, to kind of take that onus off of Wilson? So that's how you have to look at it. You have to look at it from a gamesmanship style away. So
And Wilson's playing time is so important to the Caps. Also, because you were talking about how you think offensive plus minus is so much more important than defensive plus minus. And Tom Wilson's plus minus this year is plus 20. Yeah, plus 20, which is insane. 23 goals, 26 assists. He has 49 points, and he's playing. He's also a great defensive player. He plays in the penalty kill. He's important. He's on the power play. He's important.
He's a very key player.
Every single facet of the game, yeah. Like it's we need him. We need him on the ice, and if you need somebody to neutralize, maybe you do have to play somebody a little bit bigger. Because,
but I also want to throw this fact out there. When they started making plus minus awards, which I don't think they do it anymore because they realized how stupid it was. Do you know who was the first recipient of the plus minus award? Jeff Schultz. Do you know who his defensive partner was? Mike Green. Of course, your plus minus. Of course, your plus minus is going to be for the roof. You're on the ice with Ovechkin, Backstrom, maybe Semin, Mike Green all the time. Of course, your plus minus is going to be through the roof. I think he was like a plus 56 or something like that season. It was
wasn't Protas last season something ridiculous too? His plus minus. It was like in the 40. Let me check what that was. It was outrageous.
But if you look at Chychrun this season.
Like plus 20.
He's plus 20, 23. Yeah, plus 23.
Yeah.
So last season, Protas was plus 40 even. But that's also because he had a career year last season with 30 goals, 36 assists, 66 points. I mean, he's doing good. He's got 19 goals, 19 assists for 38 points, and he's a plus 14. But he could still hit 30 goals this season. There is still the potential for Protas to hit that. But obviously, he's kind of taken a step down, obviously, after having a great season last season. He's somebody who actually, in a way, needs to step up a little bit.
Yeah.
I'd like to see
Josh,
him.
We talk about it a lot in our podcast now. We don't think Protas is playing up to his potential. He's still playing okay, but he's not playing to what he was last year, what he can be.
Like he's 11 goals away from 30 goals, so he can match last season. If I can get 25 to 30 goals out of him for the season, I think that's still a successful season for him. McMichael, obviously, it's been a bit of a struggle for him this season. Part of that, I don't know, is if it's part of the fact that Dubois went down and he went down early and it just kind of discombobulated things right away for McMichael.
Because McMichael was basically the plug, and they said, okay, you're going to go here, now you're going to play here, you're going to help this player. And it was never like, who's going to help McMichael?
Yeah, and for a guy, and this is for any player, honestly. You want that consistency, of who you're playing with and the style that you need to play, because obviously if you're playing on the first line with Ovechkin and Strome, you have to play a certain way for that first line. And then if you play on the second line with Wilson and Pierre-Luc Dubois, you're going to be playing a completely different way. And then if you're playing on a line with say Sordif and Milano, you're playing a completely different way. And then if you're on the fourth line with Dowd, that's a whole different way. But if you're able, and that's one of the reasons why that Wilson, Dubois, McMichael line was so successful last season, was because they had that constant consistency to produce and play the way they need to play to do that production for them. Because right now, last season, he was 26 goals, 31 assists for 57 points and a plus 19. He has 8 goals, 23 assists for 31 points, and a plus 6. So he's still having a good season. His assists are up there. His goals just aren't.
And when you are able to have 4 lines that are that drastically different, it's tougher for a player to move between lines. But if you could do it successfully, it's hell for the other team to try and defend that. Something we talked about, and Carberry has talked about a bit this season, is, we've all heard it. The Caps have no finishers. And that made sense at the time, and maybe it's a little bit dramatic to say that, but Connor McMichael comes to mind when breakaways, I don't see him finishing those chances, and I think he could easily have 15 goals with a couple more lucky bounces, but a couple more skilled finishes.
Well, I mean, when you look at that, it's like when Carberry says we don't have many finishers, I mean, keep in mind, okay, Tom Wilson's the one guy who's finishing a lot. Ovi, when he's hot or not, he's one of those finishers. Strome has 16 goals, 31 assists for 47 points. So he's third on the team in scoring right now. But he's not scoring as many goals as he did last season too. So
Yeah,
it's like,
no.
if you can,
He's heated up recently, but
Yeah,
he struggled through the middle there.
Yeah.
and I think if you can get Strome to keep that hot streak going, coming out of the break, you can get Protas back, give him a little bit of a hot streak, McMichael a bit of a hot streak. Those are the guys who, as I'm just like eyeballing the roster real quick.
Dubois.
Well, Dubois
sort
is a
of.
different story. Dubois, here's the thing with Dubois. Dubois, we don't need him to light up the score sheet. What we need him to do is be that second line center who really just opens up the play a lot more. Because if you can get Dubois to open up the play, especially say you have it's back to Wilson, McMichael on that line, okay, well, Wilson's points are going to go up even more. But at the same time, that's going to reactivate McMichael more. Or if you put Protas on that line, it's going to reactivate Protas much more. So that's what Dubois is, what I'm expecting him. He's going to reactivate some of these guys who were finishers last year that need to become finishers again this season.
Absolutely. And I think that the Caps, they've all season long, injuries excluded, they've had the pieces to the puzzle. They've sometimes struggled to figure out where those pieces should go. And that's why sometimes they make it happen. They go 9-1-1, but then they don't win 2 games in a row for a month and a half. And that inconsistency doesn't fly in the playoffs. If you can't win a back-to-back game, you can't really win a playoff series. You could win 1, 3, 5, and 7, but that's besides the point. But then again, the Caps are a team that showed when they get hot, they get scorching hot. So I think that once you make it to the playoffs, regular season honestly is out the window. Like last year, once the Caps made it to the playoffs, sure, how well they did affects the seeding, but it doesn't matter what happened in the regular season.
There were bigger factors at play when it came to that playoff run. I mean, Montreal, everyone knew Montreal. They would put up a fight, but they weren't going to make it out of that first round with the Capitals. The bigger problem is, and Starkey and I, we talked a lot about this, is that unfortunately for the Capitals, there was a massive distraction of the great chase of OV breaking the record that Wayne Gretzky had. And because they got their playoff spot locked in so early, and that's a problem. When you get your playoff spot locked in so early, you take your foot off the gas.
Complacency.
And there's a complacency, but then you add in the fact that, okay, we have our playoff spot secured in like late February, early March. So like a good month and a half before or 2 months possibly before the playoffs even start. Now we're just going to focus on getting Ovi the record and the circus that comes with that. And honestly, that looked like a very tired team. I agree with Ted Starkey when he says that this is a team that was very tired because of just the circus that came with the great chase. And when they needed to turn it back on after Ovechkin broke the record, they just couldn't truly turn it back on. They were easily able to get through Montreal in the playoffs. But when it came to a team like Carolina, that's when you could really tell that this was a tired team. This was a team that had been, they peaked way too early, clinching that playoff spot 2 months before the playoffs started, having the chase with Ovechkin, and then just not having anything left in the tank. And which brings another point about like Ovechkin. I mentioned earlier, it's like, we got to know what's going to be happening with Ovechkin sooner or later. Is he coming back for another year, or is he going to retire and go back to Russia and play for Dynamo Moscow so his kids can see him play in Russia for his hometown team before he officially retires? So the question then becomes, if Ovi does announce that he's retiring, what type of circus is going to follow the Capitals around? Because it's going to happen. Because that the league has probably told Ovi, if you're going to retire, you need to announce it in advance because we want to honor you before you play your last game.
And
And
maybe they can't afford to have that circus act if they want to be able to be a driven, hungry team in the playoffs.
yeah, so it's a very interesting dynamic because as much as we don't want it to be, a lot of it is also going to revolve around Ovechkin because there's going to be those guarantee you once the trade deadline is done, the number one question is always going to be about, is this it for Ovi? Is this the last time Ovi's played in Philadelphia? Is this the last time Ovi's played in Pittsburgh? Because they have that back-to-back in April, right
End of the
at the
season.
very end of the season.
Yeah.
And if that game against Pittsburgh at home is his last home game as a Capital during the regular season, he ain't playing that last game in Columbus to end the regular season. Because he's going to play his last regular season game as a Capital at home. It ain't going to be on the road.
Yeah,
So,
to your point, if the Capitals are going to make a run if they're going to make the playoffs, if they're going to make a run, it's going to be a run towards the end of the season, right after the break, and the Capitals are going to be getting hot. They're going to be playing well right then, going into the playoffs. Not going to be secured a spot. Definitely not going to be secured a spot like they were last year. So I think that does play into their favor more than it did last year. That if they're going to make the playoffs, if they're going to have a run in the playoffs, they're going to be hot going into the playoffs as well.
and something to keep in mind too, as I'm looking at the standings, Carolina, they're out of reach. Don't
Yeah.
even think about Carolina. But one thing to put out there is the Penguins and the Islanders. Those are two teams who may not be in the playoffs at all. That 2-3 spot could easily be Columbus, Washington. Because Columbus just recently replaced their head coach with Dean Evison with Rick Bowness, and they've been red hot since
They won like 9 of their last 10 or something crazy.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
And, that's the thing. So it's like, let's see if they keep that going when coming out of the break under Rick Bowness. But, if that's the case in Pittsburgh and the Islanders fall, which the Islanders should completely fall off because I don't know how that team is in third place in the Metro with that team. Like on paper,
Sorokin.
that team does not work.
It's goaltending.
It ain't coming from Sorokin. It's coming from Rittich. But also, Patrick Waugh is a good coach, but even with that team, it's like, come on, Patrick. That your defense is pathetic. Scott Mayfield is not even an NHL defenseman on any other NHL team. Come on now. But also at the same time with the Islanders, I'll give them this though. They have a catalyst, and it's not their goaltending. The catalyst is that kid Matthew Schaefer.
I was going to say
that's their true catalyst right there. But the thing is that the Penguins and the Islanders, those are two teams that I would keep keeping an eye on. Are they going to be able to sustain this to actually clinch those playoff spots? If not, that's where Columbus and Washington can come in and kind of take those spots because the Caps are only 5 points behind Pittsburgh and 4 points behind the Islanders. And then Columbus is actually the same as the Capitals. Actually, Columbus has, granted, Columbus has 3 games in hand. Pittsburgh has 3 games in hand, and the Islanders have 1 game in hand on the Capitals. So it's going to be tough for the Caps, but there is a way for them to do it. But it also factors in on what Pittsburgh and the Islanders do, and in a way, what Buffalo and Boston do. Buffalo's been red hot ever since, getting a new general manager, especially one who actually knows hockey. Let's be honest, Kevin Adams was not a good general manager at all in Buffalo. Jarmo Kekalainen, regardless of what people may say about him and his time in Columbus, the guy at least knows hockey. So, and that, and it feels like with him in the office now instead of Adams, there's been a bit more relief in that locker room to be able to play a lot better than they had under the previous administration. So, and then Boston's kind of interesting. Boston, they heated up at the right time.
Great.
Yeah, they heated up at the right time, but at the same time, they could be in another case of like with Columbus. Is that really, is this going to be sustainable coming out of the break for Boston as well? So you got to look at how a lot of these other teams play.
That's a great point. But to what you were talking about Ovechkin, is this the last year? 2 things that hang in the balance is A, we've seen the jersey swaps start to happen. We've seen that. So it's definitely, it's coming to an end. That's not an indicator. Do you think hitting 1,000 is something that he's thinking about right now? Or is
No,
that really just like, if it happens, that's cool, but it's not the focus?
I don't think it's a focus at all. And the thing about the jersey swap thing, apparently I found this out, but he's been doing the sticks thing and the jerseys for years. It's just that for whatever reason this season, there has been more emphasis on social media about the jersey swaps.
It's probably just a lot of speculation.
Because of the speculation. And I think that's what it's doing. It's just fueling speculation. I don't know, like, if it's a definitive thing. And it sounds like, in the most recent interview that Chris Patrick did on the Hockey Lifers podcast with Jeff Merrick and Bruce Boudreau, he openly said, we haven't talked to Ovechkin about it yet. We've talked to Ovechkin about other things like what the team needs, but we haven't talked about his future. So I don't think 1,000 goals is something that's on his mind, honestly, because he's at 919 now. If he were to try to hit 1,000, he probably would have to play like 3 more years. And I just don't see that happening. I really don't. So that's why I don't think 1,000 is something that's on his mind. And then, like, for the jersey thing, I mean, we know that going in the training camp, Anze Kopitar of the LA Kings announced that he was retiring at the end of the year because it's the last year of his contract. So obviously we were going to see something with Ovi and Kopitar on that end because Kopitar is retiring. The stuff with Malkin and Crosby, we kind of expected that a little bit because he had just hit 900, and that was the point of the message of the jersey of what Malkin wrote on his jersey. It was the whole congratulations for scoring 900. That's why that jersey swap was done. So it's just one of those things where you guys gotta, like, again, he's been doing it for years. We know he's building a museum back home in Russia, which is where all of his goal sticks, goal pucks, jerseys from other players, sticks from other players, other equipment and other memorabilia and stuff like that. It's all going to go into this Hall of Fame or museum that he's building back home in Russia. So that's why the jersey thing, it's like, I think the fact that it's getting more put on social media, it's just more fueling that speculation of what is Ovechkin going to do.
Yeah, I think the Caps are definitely, coming to obviously the most important part of the season. But this is when the Caps figure out: do we turn it on, make a late push, or is this a season where it's like, what the heck? How did we miss the playoffs? So
If the Caps
if there's
missed the
any,
playoffs, it's because of the injury to Dubois. Because when Dubois went down, the team did not look the same. That's what I would pinpoint it on. The fact that they
major
lost
ripple effect for sure.
Yep. Because I've seen it as a hockey player myself on teams that I played on. There was a team that I played on. He wasn't like our top player, but the guy got hurt like early on in the season, and you could just feel the wind just get taken out of the team. And it just kind of ripples through our season. So it's like when you lose a key player like that, or a very well-liked guy in your locker room, that reverberates a lot louder than people think it does. So,
And to what we were talking about, earlier, the next 4 games after the break are going to be the key telling sign of what the Capitals are going to do at the trade deadline, but also if the Capitals are going to be able to make a run or not. Because if we fall
Absolutely.
3 of those 4 games or 4 of those games, I mean, it's going to be really tough, especially being having played more games than all the teams that we're trying to chase right now.
and here's the thing: 3 of those 4 games, let's see here. 3 of those 4 games are against playoff teams. Vegas is first in the Pacific Division. Utah's in the first wild card spot for the West, and Montreal's in second place in the Atlantic Division. And then, of course, the Flyers are currently they're 4 points behind the Capitals, but they're kind of, they're a little under the Caps, and, them making the playoffs is going to be a little bit harder to do.
Definitely,
So,
but it's really show Chris Patrick what you're made of. Not just Chris Patrick, even just show your fans. Show your fans, are you going to bend or break when you're put to the test? So I guess to close out this week's episode, we should go down the line. We'll start with Adam, I'll go, and then close out Michael. Yes or no, do the Caps make the playoffs, and why?
such a tough question, Josh, because obviously I want to say yes, and if I say no, like if I say yes, like am I being biased? It's a really tough question. To be honest, I'm gonna have to go. I'm gonna have to go. They'll make. I'm gonna say they'll miss the.
I just
I'm gonna
love the
say
struggle here. It's like, oh
yeah.
my God, I want to say the right thing to make the people
Oh,
happy, but I don't know what to say.
It's
oh.
not what you want. It's what you think will happen. Yeah.
You know?
Honestly, I think being games in hand right now to the teams we're trying to chase is going to come back to bite us. I think it's going to be really close. Unfortunately, going to be really close. I don't see the Capitals making the playoffs. I see them just barely missing it, being that like maybe that last team out. Um, yeah, I think right now we're in a really tough position on what we're going to do at the trade deadline. And I don't see us making a move, making a big move. I see maybe us maybe splitting those next 4 games, being like kind of in an iffy position. I don't see us going to get someone like Kyrou or getting somebody from the Pacific Division, somebody who's not doing so well right now. So unfortunately, I see us just missing, but I see the Capitals seeing that potential for the next season and kind of pushing back after.
Yeah, and to what you said, we've seen it also come down to the last game 2 years ago. The Flyers don't make it because we win that last game. That's what games in hand can do in a race that's so close. I'm going to disagree. I'm going to say that the Caps do make it by the skin of their teeth. They're going to make this playoff run. But to me, it might just be the stupid blind optimist sports fan in me. But on a team with the players that we have, and we might even get a Cole Hudson who can inject new life, I don't see that a team like that missing the playoffs, no matter how hard it gets. It's going to be the happy ending to the movie. At least I hope. And it's going to be that when you have a guy like Ovi, you have a goalie like Logan Thompson, you have a great defensive core, you have amazing forwards, up and coming forwards, experienced forwards, you have all that balance. And you have PLD back. It's hard for me to see with all the pieces how Carberry is not going to be able to figure out how to put it together.
Yeah, I'm siding with Adam here. I'm going to play the villain completely. Um, I'm not going to have the optimism or anything. I'm not going to go straight up pessimism either. But I think they miss. The fact that, as I stated, Pittsburgh has 3 games in hand. The Islanders have 1. Columbus has 3 games in hand. If you want to add the wild card picture,
The
Buffalo,
wild card's gonna be so tough. The wild
Buffalo,
card's
Buffalo, and Boston both have 2 games in hand on the Capitals. The Flyers, who are 4 points behind the Capitals, have 3 games in hand on the Caps. And Ottawa and Toronto, who are 2 points behind the Capitals, have 2 games in hand on the Capitals. That's your entire wild card picture right there, along with what the Metro could be like. This cards are stacked against the Capitals. Now, I would not put it past the Capitals to find a way to do it. If it does happen, it'll be on the very last day of the regular season. But my gut tells me, this season kind of got lost a bit in the middle of the season, especially when Dubois went down due to the injury in the 6th game of the season. The Caps kind of lost a little bit of their identity and stuff like that. And to try to refine that identity as quickly as possible coming out of the stretch and all the other teams have games in hand on you, it's a tough ask of the team to do. If they miss the playoffs, I would not be disappointed because I know that's the way it is. Plus, it's something that we've been talking about on my podcast. This has been the season of parity. And the Eastern Conference has had the most parity all season, especially in the Metro Division, especially in the Atlantic Division. And because of that parity, that puts a team who should be in the playoffs, like a Capitals or a Toronto or an Ottawa, out of the playoff picture. Because when you look at it right now, Detroit is in third in the Atlantic. That's a team that a lot of people were thinking maybe wild card at best, but playoff bubble. You got Pittsburgh, who they had ridden them out at the start of the season. The Islanders, people were saying we're going to be a bubble team. Buffalo, people were going like, well, we don't know when it comes to Buffalo. The Bruins, people were saying they could possibly be a bubble team. Those are the teams in the playoff picture right now. And teams like the Caps, the Senators, and the Maple Leafs, and even the Florida Panthers are not in the playoff picture right now. The Panthers are 4 points behind the Capitals and also hold 2 games in hand.
Yeah, so
that is why I think if they do it, it is purely because they went on a massive 18-2 tear, which I don't think will happen. I just think the parity and the unfortunate injury to Dubois that really affected a lot of the chemistry in that locker room or on the lineups, and the parity and the games in hand advantage that the other teams have on the Caps, it's going to be a very tough ask. And that's why I truly think the Caps missed the playoffs. So to everyone who hates me, just feel free to just give me all the hate online. I can take it. I'm a big boy.
Yeah.
You know?
I want to say if I agree, and I think if not, I don't totally agree. I think if it's gonna be the Capitals, if they're gonna make the playoffs, it's gonna have to be in that Metro division. I agree. I don't see us being able to make that wild card with all those teams. The Panthers behind us, all these teams that have games in hand. I think the most uncertainty is in the Metro with the Penguins, the Islanders, and the Columbus, who are kind of having these years that we don't fully expect from them. So I think that's the most uncertainty in the Eastern Conference playoff picture. So if we're gonna make a run and make it into the playoffs, I think it's gonna have to be into the Eastern Conference, but it's gonna be really tough.
Yeah, I agree. It's essentially what it comes down to at the end of the day is do the Caps have what it takes to go on a tear to make the playoffs? But also you have to ask this question. If they're able to, at what cost will it give you to make the playoffs, spend all that energy to get into it, only to potentially fizzle out in the first round? Because that's the other thing you have to look at, is that you have these teams who will heat up at the right time, and they'll go into the playoffs hot, and they'll stay hot. Like we've seen it, like St. Louis in 2019 is a prime example of that. But then you have other teams who get red hot a little too early and ride it into the playoffs, and then they just fizzle out in like the first round. So it's like you have to, so you have to look at it and you have to proceed that with caution a little bit.
That's true, but I think that you definitely have to proceed with caution, but I think that you do need to do everything you possibly can to get into the playoffs, because there's no saving energy for the playoffs if you don't make the playoffs.
Which is true, but at the same time, you don't want to be completely gassed at the same time, too.
But you'd rather make the playoffs.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You want to make the playoffs, but you also want to make the playoffs meaningful for your team. You don't want to just we made the playoffs, and then we just get bounced in the first round in 4 or 5 games,
If only we just won a few more shootouts.
I actually, here's the thing. I said this at the very beginning of the show. I am against the NHL shutting down for the Olympics. There's a couple things I'll give the Olympics credit on. Goalie interference. Let me put my thumb in the frame, my hand in the frame. Goalie interference. I agree with how they do it. Even Connor Hellebuck took a shot at the NHL yesterday about how goalie interference is called in the Olympics compared to the NHL. I like how they view hits. They don't look at the injury. They look at the intent of the hit. Just because a guy got hurt does not mean the intent was to hurt the player. If Tom Wilson hit me and I'm 5'11", 165 pounds, I would get hurt regardless. A clean shoulder-on-shoulder hit, I would be gone. I would be dust in the wind somewhere. But if its intent's good, then it's not a penalty. And number 3, their playoff or their overtime format. In the preliminary rounds, it is 3v3, followed by a shootout. Then it is and it's 5 minutes, and then it's a 3v3 for 10 minutes in the qualifying rounds. And then in the medal rounds, it's just sudden death overtime. And I like that. I like how they bring in the 10 minutes before it goes to a shootout. I think the 5-shooter thing is a little bit better because you're able to recycle the players, whereas in the NHL, you cannot recycle players. Unless you go, but that was because
he was shot every other round.
Yeah,
but that was the Olympics. So when he did that,
that's what I'm saying.
But you couldn't do that in the NHL. You have to go for the entire roster before you can go back to TJ Oshie. I would like to
Garen
see.
Bjorklund would be shooting before you can go back to TJ Oshie.
Yeah, Clay Stevenson would just go in and just skate on to whatever goalie's in net at that time, or
Lined up for a big slapper.
Oh yeah, you saw that KHL thing?
Well, with the goalie.
Yeah.
The goalie hardest shot,
yeah.
the hardest shot.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Former Washington Capitals Zach Fucale came in third.
Good for him.
So, although I like the guy who won because he just completely fell doing it. But that's the thing. It's like you got it. Like I'll give the Olympics credit on those three things, because those, especially when it comes to how we view hits in the NHL and how we view goalie interference in the NHL, those two things need to be fixed badly, because not every hit is a bad hit. Guys get hurt. It happens. But then also in our overtime formats, we need to fix it, because honestly, I come from the era of ties, and I would love to see ties come back potentially if it gets rid of the shootout. So that's just me.
All right. Caps have some work to do. The NHL has some work to do. Michael, we want to say thank you so much for joining us on this episode, and we'll give you an opportunity. You have some hockey tournaments coming up. You have a show yourself. If you want to plug them, go for it.
So I run the website TXHThockey.com. I also do the podcast, The More Phenomenal Hockey Show. As you can tell by the name, More Phenomenal, it's Power Rangers related, because I started the show with a couple Power Ranger actors and an actor from the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie from 2014, Toru Masamune, who he is the main person who is on my show the majority of the time. But I do bring in hockey writers and insiders from around the NHL onto the show as well when I cannot have Toru on the show. So I have had Ted Starkey, obviously, talk about Capitals, Bill Meltzer talking about Philadelphia Flyers, Max Miller talking Sharks, Murray Pan talking Ottawa Senators. I'm working on some PWHL stuff. I'm working on some other guests coming out of the Olympic break. I'm not going to say who yet, because I don't want to say something and then next thing you know, it falls apart, because that happens that's just my life in general, falling apart. You can follow me on social media. Me personally, it's at the Lindenbaum 75. And that is the only account I do have for TikTok. So I want to stress that one right there. That is the only account that I have on TikTok. I do not have a TXHT account. So any hockey content that you want to see, that's how you see it on there. For social media for TXHT, it is at TXHT_hockey. And then follow me on Twitch at the Lindenbaum75, because when I do get to stream, I'm playing old school NHL games on PlayStation 1. Because I'm old. Look at these young whippersnappers. Yeah, so I'm actually going to be in April. I'll be playing in the National Ball Hockey League as part of the Delmarva Llamas, as part of the Tier 3 Maryland division, which will be played in Rockville, Maryland. I will be posting more information about that on the TXHT social medias once that stuff is available. And then at the end of May, I was going to say the beginning of June, but that we just found out last weekend that date got changed on us. But May 29th through 31st, I'll be in Brantford, Ontario, Canada for the 5th year in a row, playing in the Walter Gretzky Street Hockey Tournament as part of Kevin Smith, yes, Silent Bob himself, View Askew Street Hockey League, where I captain the LA Mings, who is our namesake is Ming Chen from AMC's Comic Book Men. So, as you could tell, I have some ties to Hollywood, but I'm not a famous Hollywood person. I am the whipping boy who has to suffer. So, but yeah, so that's what I got coming up for hockey. I got that tournament. And then obviously for anyone who lives in Montgomery County and is interested, except for this Monday because it's President's Day, but every Monday at the Dasic Community Center in Rockville, Maryland at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, I run an adult ball hockey program. So anyone 18 years or older, you are welcome to come out, play hockey, and have fun, because that's what the whole point of the program. So that's every Monday night at the Dasic Community Center in Rockville, Maryland, off of Trevilla Road. I'll just give these guys the details and they can just put it in the YouTube description thing. Make their lives a lot easier, because I know I just said a lot of stuff. So
Absolutely. If you want any of the links to go follow Michael, those will be in the description, as well as our own links. Thank you all so much for tuning in to this week's episode of Dingers and Dashers. Our special guest, Michael. I've been Josh. That's Adam. And we will see you later.